Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we are going to go over the Beastmen. We're going to be doing a beginner build for the Beastmen. Wow, that's hard to say. Beginner build Beastmen. Um, so today this is the army. We can look at it for a second. I think we'll start with the what is it that Beastmen excel at right now. So Beastmen are probably one of the stronger factions overall in domination, maybe as well in land battles, but what Beastmen are really bringing Beastmen to the top of the ladder is both their marks. So they've been getting extra diversity um, in their units from the marks of chaos. So example, it's Zangors, Khornegors, but you also have things like well, the Gorgons are strong, but the Centigors of Tzeentch. So the Beastmen have got a lot of nice new tools, and then on top of that, Centigors are just so strong. So we'll talk about Centigors and why I've recommended you bring 7 of them. Um, but especially in domination, they're very good. So definitely a faction that's being uh, supported by some of these elements, and we'll talk a little bit about them as we go. But yeah, so Beastmen, they also have most of their units have Vanguard, and a lot of them also have Stalk. So the archers have Stalk and Vanguard. The spears have Stalk and Vanguard. Zangors have just Vanguard. Um, the Centigors all have Vanguard. So what happens with the Beastmen is that they're very quick to the points, and since domination is now where all of the points open immediately, this is one of the fastest factions to get to the points. So you're very quickly applying pressure to your opponents, and because Centigors are so good, you're applying consistent pressure throughout the game. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about like the specific units and how they contribute to this overall idea of being strong. So first of all, Malagor. Why do we bring Malagor? Malagor is cheap. Malagor is super cheap. He's 1200, and for a lord, that puts him in as one of the cheapest lords. And then because he's also flying, he's sort of like a Balthazar Gelt, where it's just like he's super cheap and hard to kill. In this kit, I've just brought him with Flock of Doom. Now, Flock of Doom has gotten worse over time, and there are other options that you can consider. Like if your opponent really likes single entities, bringing like a caster with just Traderkin is very strong. But basically, Flock of Doom is a spell that pays for itself very well if you can hit either A, multiple units, or B, very expensive units. With either that rely on high armor, because this doesn't, it ignores armor, um, or you can hit like big clumps of units, and it's really good. I think my rule of thumb is if you can hit 3 units that are above 500 value, you can overcast Flock of Doom and do a lot of damage. Otherwise, you can undercast it, and then the whole time that you're casting, you're going to be getting this vigor replenishment. And some of the units, yeah, so the Centigors all have this trait Rowdy that gives them perfect vigor. We'll talk more about that in a second, but the other units will benefit a lot from having their vigor reduced as you play. So you want to be casting this like at the start of the battle and as the battle is going on. You want to be casting them whenever you can, and you just you'll be getting a little bit of extra vigor, which can really add up over the course of the game, because if you're exhausted, your units have like negative 35% or more even of their melee stats. So you want to be getting the most out of vigor. Now, um, let's look at these units first. Let's just talk about these units first. Beastmen have, in my opinion, one of the best archers in the game. Um, because they have Stalk, they have Vanguard, they're 120 models, reasonably high missile strength. But one of the things that I think is really cool about them is that they both have very high speed, and they have low leadership. So what tends to happen with Ungor Raiders, so let's say that you Burning Head, you just do an undercasted Burning Head on one Ungor Raider. It's going to route, and then it's going to come back with 120 models. Um, so it runs away quickly, yes, but then it comes back to the battle quickly. And why that helps you is if your opponent like starts to shoot them and it's an awkward position, they'll route for you. You don't have to give them another order to get them away. So obviously it's better to keep them alive, but they tend to return, they tend to start losing leadership, they run away, they come back. So it's very hard to get rid of an Ungor Raider completely if you're playing against the Beastmen. Um, Now to protect your archers, I'm gonna recommend you bring some Ungor spears, and the ones in the secondary are also there for protecting your archers. So I'll just talk about them all at once. Uh, Ungor spears are some of the worst units in the game in terms of like what their damage output is. Um, Low leadership, very low armor, relatively low weapon strength, but decent bonus versus large. But they have stock, they have Vanguard. So you can leave these as like a screen for your Ungor Raiders. So your opponent's gonna say, okay, I want to charge my cav into your archers, and then as they're charging, they discover that there are braced spears that do have charge reflection and charge defense versus large. So while these things won't do damage in most circumstances, they provide a really good roadblock and let your archers shoot for a while. And Warhammer is really a game where even bad archers, if they use all of their ammo, will pay for themselves. Um, and Ungor Raiders will pay for themselves and then more. So these are just there as a roadblock. They have the expendable trait. Both of these have expendable. It doesn't list it here, but both of them have expendable. Oh, yeah, here it is. Um, they both have expendable, and that makes them uh, only 2 capture weight. So they're pretty bad at capture weight. That's not why they're there. They're just there to buffer, really. And they are cheap, so if you have to do in the late game, summon 2 of them to get onto points, um, they will do that. And again, they have Vanguard. So anytime there are Vanguard points on a map, you can use those Vanguards. Okay, that's the spears. The just to compare the two, the 375 one is significantly better because it has 8+8 melee defense and shields. But because neither of them are particularly here to do damage, it's not that big of a difference, honestly. And you can kind of just choose them depending on which one makes more sense in the time or which one fits your spend better. Yeah, and then let's talk about Zangors. I talked a little about them in the Zinch video, so you can see me talk about them a little more at depth there. Why I'm recommending this in the beginner's build is that your uh, they have silver shields, they have Vanguard, they're good defensive stats, not great melee attack stats. They do have this arcane charge, so they get better as you cast spells, up to 20% better as you cast spells. And then a lot of these units, I guess I'll mention Primal Fury. This is a trait that actually increases the speed by 10% and the melee attack and gives them ITP. So Beastmen are a little bit faster. I feel like all of the stats that Beastmen have don't quite do them justice. They're always performing a little better than they appear because traits like Primal Fury, traits like Arcane Charge are giving them a little extra boost. But Zangors are good in the beginning army because they just are good at catching enemy skirmishers on their shields and their extra Zinch shield. So it makes it difficult to whittle them down with skirmishers. Then the Bestigor. So Bestigors aren't something that you see that often in top competitive play. But what they are good for is that they actually have pretty reasonably high armor piercing, strength. Decent melee attack and melee defense, not great. With Primal Fury, they have, okay melee stats. But the extra armor and the high leadership is kind of unique on the Beastmen roster. So, like, for example, these are 54 leadership, and these have plus 16 leadership on the Chaff. So they'll stick around a little bit longer. And for beginners, I like that trait. I like that you have some infantry to mix in that doesn't route right away, so everything doesn't like break at once, and you lose immediately. Um, Now, yeah, so these two are protecting the archers. These two are getting on the points at the beginning, maybe in combination with these archers. And then Bestigors are kind of providing the sustainability. Now, I am recommending a Centigor throwing axes. I guess this is the first time that I'll talk about Centigors. So let's talk about Centigors in general. Centigors outperform their stats. I think that's probably the best thing to say. They have very high charge bonus, and they're very fast. Not the fastest cav in the game, but they are very fast. Oh, and with the Primal Fury, so they get um, +8 on this, puts them in the category of like some of the fastest cav in the game. Now, and they also have Perfect Vigor, and Perfect Vigor, as I was saying, is a 35% hidden buff. So if your units are lasting long enough to get the usage out of their vigor, they're going to be 35% better in the middle and late game than they would have without the perfect vigor. Um, Not only that, they stay fast. Other units, they get slower after they lose their vigor, but Centigors don't. So how do you use Centigors? Basically, Centigors are almost good into anything. Not exactly true. There are some things that Centigors will trade down into, but in general, if you can charge something with a Centigor, whether or not it's infantry, whether or not it's another cav unit, maybe even sometimes single entities, uh, Centigors will do very well. Centigors don't want to be charged and they don't want to be shot because they do have low armor. However, if because their speed is so fast, and even in a like mid game and late game, they keep their speed very quick. Um, you as the Beastman player always want to be thinking, how can I be charging things with my Centigors? How can I avoid getting charged? So that's something that as you go from beginner to intermediate to expert player, you want to consider not getting charged. That's something you want to keep in mind. Now, the Centigor throwing axe is a special unit, 50 more gold than the Centigor, but let's check out its stats relative to the Centigor. So it does have a lower charge bonus by 12, and it has lower melee defense, but about the same melee attack, and it still has the Primal Fury. So, Fury. So the Centigor throwing axe is still a melee cav unit. It does have a little less health too. It's less cost effective than the Centigors in melee, but it can still be used in melee. The other thing is they have armor piercing missiles. And armor piercing missiles is something that shouldn't be underestimated in this game, with relatively high missile strength, by the way, because so many things, expensive things, rely on armor. That's like their the big benefit they have is armor. And Centigor throwing axes with this missile strength, I did a test, and reasonably high ammunition, short range, but reasonably high ammunition. A single Centigor throwing axe will kill the Shredder of Lestria, a 15k, 15,000 HP monster. I can't remember if I even gave it heals, but basically, incredibly good into big targets, reasonably good into everything. If you can throw your throwing axes, obviously you'll get outranged by archers, but we do have some archers of our own with much larger range. So yeah, these are good. They are good at throwing. If you need them to charge, they can charge. So again, another just well-rounded unit. I'll talk a little bit more about these units as we get through the secondary. But yeah, so Centigors are really important for how the Beastmen play. We'll come back to that point too. Lastly, the Butchers of Kalkangaard, kind of like a staple. It's high melee attack, melee defense. It has Blood Greed, which gives them extra melee attack and melee defense as they get kills. But the big reason that people bring them, besides the silver shields, is that they have regeneration. So this is a very cost-effective Minotaur because it can basically live 2 lives. And if you get all of your value out of the first one, you can get a ton of extra value out of the second life. So this thing will be good. Usually used as like a anti-infantry unit, but it will also do damage against single entities and armored cav. Yeah, so another good generalist unit. Talked about these. These you might want to consider summoning at the beginning, just for the archers. Now, Khornegors, I think, are very good in this, because again, they have reasonably high... Let's compare the Khorngor to a Zangor for a second. So, Khorngors have, and we should look at this. They do have Frenzy, so +10. Just add +10 to that. So they have more melee attack than Zangors with their extra +10. Same amount of weapon strength. And they have armor piercing. So Zangors don't have armor piercing. And humongous bonus versus large. This is really big. 18 is very big. And then they will go unbreakable in some situations if they get their hit points less than 50%. Basically, Khorngors are a very good answer to anti-large stuff. So they're quick. They have Vanguard deployment, and then in the middle game, they're very good at killing armored cav. So it's nice to have summon these out. Lastly, the Gore Herds. They're okay. They actually have decent melee stats, pretty high weapon strength, decent bonus versus infantry. They trade okay into mid-tier and chaff infantry, so they'll beat like marauder kind of units. So it's important to have some of them. And also they have full capture weight, so that helps too. Now, we talked about the throwing axes. The great weapons are probably worth mentioning too. Compared to the regular Centigor, they have less. Here, let's do it this way. They have less melee attack, they have less melee defense, but they do have almost all armor piercing damage. So sometimes you just need a great weapon unit to kill an armored infantry and armored cav. The Tzeentch ones, Centigors of Tzeentch. So you can see they have practically the same stats, except that Centigors of Tzeentch have magic damage. And let's just take this off for a second so we can see this unit. Let's just do this for a minute. Okay. Centigors of Tzeentch, compared to the regular Centigors, they have 800 extra health, so that helps. They do have magic attack. But the big thing is this arcane charge. So after you use up most of your magic, maybe 50%, 75% of your magic, you're actually getting 20% extra damage on the Centigor of Tzeentch. So high risk, high reward unit, because again, it's 35 armor. But it is better than the Centigor great weapons, and as you get better and more comfortable keeping your cav alive, you can consider swapping out some of these great weapons for a Centigor of Tzeentch. Or alternatively, the similarly priced Sons of Goros. And yeah, and then regular Centigors, talked about them a little bit. They are just good into a lot of different things. So And the last unit that I'll mention is the Minotaur Great Weapon. Minotaurs are, very strong, very high bonus versus large, very high weapon strength, and the blood greed that gives them a little bit more oomph as they get their kills. But okay, so like putting it all together, how does a typical game go with Beastmen? Beastmen will tend to get the points first. You'll tend to get your throwing axes out first. So maybe this is your first summon. Maybe you're summoning more of these if you're worried about protecting your archers. You'll capture the points first with this army, maybe two, maybe three, depending on how aggressive your opponent is. Then you will turn this into a battle of looking for opportunities to get rear charges and winning mobility fights. So you'll start to transition in the middle game to all of your Centigors. I'm recommending that you bring one Minotaur with Great Weapon in case there's like a big scary single entity and uh, that's something that you're having a hard time dealing with. But as you get better, you can consider bringing throwing axes because the throwing axes are very good at killing large single entities. Um, and then in the late game, you're still summoning. Maybe in the mid game you're summoning a couple Khornegors to. Uh, in the middle game and the end game, you're probably just summoning Centigors because Centigors, they'll kill spear units if they get their charge off without the spear unit fighting back. They'll kill chaff units. They'll kill other cav. Obviously, you want to like match up the kind of Centigor. So like this one is attacking an armored cav opponent cav. This one is charging like light cav. Um, but then you're trying to out mobility them, make isolations, get rear charges. You're trying to put a lot of pressure on with the mobility game. Uh, Beastmen are a highly mobile faction, which does make them a little harder to play, especially because they have lower leadership on a lot of their units and low armor. But it is a faction that you can grow into and get very good at. You can go very far. You can probably, if you become like the best Beastman player, you can go all the way to the top. This is a faction with a high ceiling. Um, yeah, so I don't know if it's worth even looking at the maps, but you'll try to capture a few points at the beginning. Yeah, so Beastmen, really cool faction. Fun to play, very like high mobile, high very quick, very high intensity. So really fun for those things. And there's a lot of other units to explore as you get more comfortable with the faction. But for now, that will be it. And the next video is going to be Warriors of Chaos. I'll be doing a beginner build on Warriors of Chaos. And then I think I just have Bretonia and Ogre Kingdoms. And I'm not sure which one is going to come first. And in the meantime, I'll be doing a 200 subscriber special this week too. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a fun and silly one. So I hope you enjoy that. For now, thank you, and I'll see you next time for Warriors of Chaos.